See where we're at. Wow. Top of the morning, everybody out there in the world. Welcome to another Essential Conversations at Wellbeings. It's a real pleasure and a privilege here to have Kevin with us here today. Kevin is an Organic Intelligence Practitioner from, get this, Tucson, Arizona. And I'm very honored to have this man in the house. Kevin works with clients individually and in group settings, also in private practice and in treatment center settings. Kevin's, I suppose, specializes in support for addiction, PTSD, trauma, depression, anxiety, and chronic and complex pain. Kevin has had quite a journey to get to being able to be to distill his passion in the world, and we're going to touch in on that here today. But just right now, I just want to thank you, Kevin, for being here with us. Feeling pretty honored.
Thanks, Nigel. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to see you too. Good to be here. Yeah.
So hey, Kev. So tell me a little bit about what was the journey, or a part, in your own note form, what was it, the defining moments to your life that has you here today? It's a big question.
Yeah.
But it does, any response will do. But what happened, man? What happened, or what didn't happen that has you here sitting with this Irish muchacho here at this time on a Sunday evening for you and a Monday for me?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that piece out, Nigel, but here we are, and it's good to be here. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose the short version here is that about 10 years ago, I went to treatment myself for the second time in my life. Can you see me and hear me okay, Nigel?
I can indeed, yeah.
Okay,
sometimes
cool.
It's a little bit slow, but it's perfect. Your voice is good.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was just over 10 years ago. And at that time, I was working in law offices here in Tucson, doing a variety of stuff that wasn't feeding my soul, among other things. And coming out of treatment, I made the conscious decision to be in the realm of wellness for the rest of my life. That was where I wanted to be. Enough of going to do a job all day and then spending all my free time trying to recover from it, going to yoga, going to meditation, seeing my therapist, doing things that felt bifurcated. It felt like two lives. We don't have two lives, we have one life. And I wanted to, anyway, maybe, how do I know? But I think that's true. I'm going with it. So I decided to pursue the trainings and the learning that would keep me in this realm,
Kev, was there something that happened in treatment center or an experience? What was it that when you knew, what, I'm living a double world here. I'm having to compensate with treatments that deal with living. Or was it a gradual thing, or was there something that happened in the treatment or the accompaniment the second time around that shifted it for you?
Yeah, I think it was in me all along for decades, that awareness and that discomfort. Okay. And there is, when you say that, I do remember a specific, in the treatment center, there was a doc who came talking about addiction. And he was talking about the genetic predisposition to addiction, and how we can pass that on. Of course, that's not a foregone conclusion. It's a predisposition, and how it manifests as a function of a person's life and lots of other factors. And when I heard him say that, I was thinking, shit, man, there's a lineage in my family. And I thought about my daughter, and it made me sad, and concerned. And then he said, and just as we can pass on the genetic predisposition, we can pass on the cure. And I know what that meant for me in that moment. It meant that we could live our lives in such a way, we could model behavior, we could demonstrate the ability to recover, change, grow, find healthy ways of being in relational fields with others, with our families and our communities and the world. It all kind of hit in that moment. And that was a contributing factor, kind of thinking about it in those terms. There's something we can do, how we act, what we do, our choices can actually be part of that cure, you know?
That's refreshing, you know, I come from Ireland, and I think every other family, if not almost every family, has some alcoholic or some sort of form of addiction in it. And it is, whether you want to call it predisposition or epigenetical or whatever it is, it passes on through the generations. You know, you see it so clearly. And for those out there listening, we can pass on many things, and we can, you know, we not only can we pass on the pain and the suffering, but we can also pass on something different. We can pass on the possibility of connection, the possibility of vulnerability, the possibility of authenticity that's modeled by someone who chooses to break that chain, to break that link. Wow. That touches me deeply when I hear you say it, because I also have a daughter, and it would be lovely to, what else, I suppose, what other gift would be more beautiful? Like what else? Big bank account doesn't really cut it, you know?
No. It's about how we live, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How we live. Anybody who's watching and tuning in right now, just take a pause and feel that one, you know? It's how we live. The relationship between mom and dad, the space between, how we interpret, or children interpret that, how it's not what you say, it's who you are, how our children that's what feeds them. And yeah, it's how we choose to live is, you know, a graduated improvement of how we live, or a redefine who we are adds to that. Wow.
Yeah, Nigel, you mentioned the intergenerational sort of trauma aspect and the epigenetics, you know, and that's another thing for some of us, isn't it? Is like an opportunity to break that cycle, to break that chain, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So you're sitting in this treatment center, maybe in a one-to-one or in a group setting, listen to this doctor, and these words are percolating in your mind and in your heart and your being, and it kind of clicks something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't quite know what, but it didn't take too long and it started to take shape. You know, I knew I wanted to learn about the body. I ended up going to massage school. I was introduced for the first time to craniosacral therapy and felt my home in the touch world. That was the stuff. So I later did certification in craniosacral and somato-emotional release, you know, touch work, and I had a notion to do the somatic experiencing training to become an SEP. And then I heard about Steve Hoskinson's Organic Intelligence, and that was just kind of starting. And you know, I think when we're walking the right path, the universe smiles sometimes and things align. And that's what happened. There was a training starting in Tucson. We were a small crew, spent 3 years studying with him in a small group format. And that was life-changing for me. You know, he's one of my most important teachers, you know, and the impact of doing that nervous system based work first on my own system, that was the big deal. I felt different. I could feel what a difference it made. And that in turn brought a difference to the relational field with my partner, with our daughters, like all of you could just feel it happening. And then to be able to evolve into the place of doing the work with clients, you know, it's a reciprocal experience. That's the beauty about doing this work. It's not some expert giving something to someone or telling somebody, here's the fucking magic key or the secret to the universe, you know, or here's what you ought to do. It's not like that, right? Inherently, we're all carrying the impulse towards wholeness, wellness, healing. It's in us, right? There's a little seed at the very least. right? Which, given some water and some sun and some air, a little TLC, maybe some sweet music, it flourishes, right? It
Mhm.
grows and blooms. And that's one of the things I love about working in a treatment center too, is getting to see the beginning of that trajectory of change. Here are the treatment center formats, typically like 30 days. So I get to be with people in that initial phase of change, right? They might just be changing their lives. Like,
Mm.
where else do I want to be, man? That's sacred. That's sacred ground. That's sacred ground, you know? Yeah. And getting to support people in that. What the hell? Why would anyone want to do anything else? I don't know. You know?
Yeah, I remember, I started like you, Kevin. I started with touch work. I actually started touch work, massaging people since I was very young, maybe like 12, 13. Anybody had pain, I was
Yeah.
skipping over for it. I was skipping over to help them, but I think it was helping me because I was craving the touch as well as a young kid. There was again
Yeah.
some organic intelligence there. But then as I started to do this work, walking with people, just
Yeah.
walking with them, exchanging, challenging the old style Venetian, I'm the professor and you got to listen to what I know better, where it becomes an
Yeah.
exchanging sort of a dynamic exchange between two people. That
Yeah.
I got to the same distillation, like where else would one want to be? And I
Yeah.
think to do that sort of work, especially the work that you're doing, like you need to hold that. Like that needs to be in the mix. If you've got that, you're in that sort of service where your whole heart's in, where your soul's in. It's You got to put in the work, but it doesn't feel like work sometimes. It just feels like such a privilege.
Indeed. That's the word. It is a privilege. It's an honor, right?
Mm.
When I started working at this treatment center, it was an hour drive each way, and when I was getting close to the place, it's a little bit remote. So it's a 2-lane road. And if you're passing a car coming at you, there's maybe a 50-50 chance it just came from the treatment center. Maybe it's a little less than that. There's more people living around there now, but I always kind of just imagined every car that was passing me, that it was the family of someone who had just dropped someone off there, right?
Mm. Right.
Because we're not just working, we're not just supporting the individual in treatment. Of course we are doing that. And then by extension, we're there for their family, we're there for their loved ones, we're there for their community. And that's the larger connected field. I like to remember that we're just serving more. We're serving each other in the broadest sense,
Mhm.
And it's not just
Wow.
true of the work I do in treatment centers, it's true of lots of things, but that's a thing I've always liked to keep present in my awareness, you know?
You talked about one of your mentors. And again, for the public out here, like us therapists, we're terribly imperfect sometimes, and we never get to that place where we have it all sorted. And I think a good therapist, or a good enough therapist, or a good enough person, um, always needs support, and at times mentorship. And who would have been the key people in your life that helped shape you again into on this path of really being with people, Kevin?
Yeah. I mean, if I think of the long line all the way back in my life, there were family, friends, teachers, the thing that's coming to mind right now also is at the treatment center where I've been working for the past 4 years. I had the privilege of being mentored by and supervised by a senior trauma doc up there. James Seymour's his name. He's a gem. And
Mhm.
he has said some things that always stick with me. One of them touches on the thing that you were just saying, because he said, well, every therapist, to be worth your salt, you should be in therapy. You should be getting that support, right? So,
Without a doubt.
um, yeah, everybody needs it. And yeah, another thing that he he has some definitions for trauma. You know, if we're talking about addiction, we're talking about trauma. We're talking about trauma all the time, I reckon. And how to work trauma safe, you know?
Mhm.
And he has a couple definitions for trauma. One is, you know, an injury that took us outside of our ability to recover, right? So we talk about the window of tolerance and nervous system outside of it and can't get deactivate back to parasympathetic or ventral vagal or whatever. There's that notion. And he also goes on to say it's any physical, emotional, or spiritual wounding, right? And this stuff is at the core of probably everything that we're going to talk about or are talking about. And my teacher Steve has a lovely definition for trauma. I wonder if he still uses this, but I remember it from a while back. He said trauma is unintegrated resource. You know,
Wow, I like that.
I like that too. And we can talk about what integration means, and we can talk about our
Mhm.
resources. I reword it. I say trauma is unintegrated fucking superpower. You know?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that juju right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's walk into that, Kevin, for a little minute. Like regulation, you know, resourcing, you know, and like these may sound like I suppose let's just jump straight into it here. So it definitely, we hear you got really mentored in your childhood by friends and family, and I suppose what we could say there is people who took interest, right?
Yeah.
People who, you know, where Kevin existed in their world, and this, and again, for the viewer out there, so important for kids that someone shows interest in them. It's not just about giving them food and a bit of shelter and throwing on some clothes on their back. Take interest. You may not notice the change right away, but that will carry them through their life in ways that you can't imagine. So you had people taking interest in you, and then you had different therapeutic mentors, and through this process, you're distilling what actually the work means to you. What's the equation? What equates to living or like moving towards life and a new enrichment, being able to regulate, being able to form healthy relationships, to be able to you know, let addiction be in the rearview mirror. So what is that distillation in ordinary terms for the public here to really help them understand? Because definitely I know for my Irish viewers and for my English viewers and then my American, there's a lot of Americans who tune in here who have addiction in their families for sure. And
Yeah.
what is that ingredient? What are the ingredients that help someone move through that process, where it's not just about giving up the substance, where it's about moving towards life in some new and deep way, and meaningful way? What is the secret sauce, Kevin, that you've distilled through this process?
Yeah. If only there were a simple answer, right? And then we could just share it with everybody, and then we'd all be done. You can go home, you know? Also, when you were recapping there, I remembered another person I want to recognize
Mhm.
as a teacher. So we might backtrack to that. I'm going to bookmark
Mhm.
my friend and poet John Anderson. I'd like to talk about him if we remember
Yeah,
that.
please.
Yeah, but to this thing of addiction, I mean, there's so many definitions for addiction, you know, ways to measure it, and that's a whole thing we can talk about. We can talk about the impact on the neurobiology and compulsivity and how it functions and negative reinforcement loops, and there's a lot of aspects to consider here. But you were specifically asking like what helps a person move through it. So
Mhm.
right, addiction is like the opposite of connection, right? Addiction is even maybe like a surrogate relationship, right? We're humans, we're built or designed for or evolved to connect, right? We're pack animals. We have mirror neurons, right? Where a third of the part of our brain related to motor movement lights up in me when I see you do it. We have nervous systems that co-regulate, right? We have brain waves that sync when they're in the bioneurofeedback labs and they measure alpha, theta, all different waves. They've done studies showing people's brain waves literally sync. And that's why we have expressions like we're on the same wavelength, or, they're on the same, we're in the same, we're built for it. We are connecting creatures. And addiction, I reckon, this part of the picture anyway, can function as sort of it's a replacement for relationship, for meaningful connection. So there's that aspect of it, right? And then it's almost a little bit of a self-perpetuating cycle here, because it's further isolating. Because generally for folks in addiction, some of us are hiding what we're doing, or we're doing it in secret, or we're feeling so shitty about ourselves that we don't want to be seen by others, or we're compensating in some way as sort of functional, alcoholics, they say, and stuff like this, and we're missing authentic connection, and in some ways it's almost like then the addiction is like, it's like an adaptive strategy to survive, especially early in life. If you don't have that family support you were talking about, and the connection and community that you're talking about, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good on our nervous system. Ventral vagal state is safe and social and connected, right? It doesn't feel good to be outside of our pack, of our crew, And so there's that, they say self-medicating, whatever, but that piece of like, turning to substance where we lack other forms of connection. Johann Hari has a great book called Lost Connection. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but it's terrific. His book before that was all about drugs and the war on drugs and how drugs have been criminalized, etc. Lost Connections was his most recent one. And he talks in there about these lost connections as like a source of depression. Mm-hmm. I think they're also a source of addiction. It's the loss of connection to meaningful work, loss of connection to meaningful values, loss of connection to nature, etc. These are things that as humans, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy, whatever framework you want to use. The bottom line is we're born to connect. We're social animals. And a meaningful life feels good, and a culture that's forcing, capitalist constructs forcing us to do shit we don't want to do just to get by, being in competition with others, it doesn't feel good. So we try to feel good some other way, and maybe in the short term it even works for a little bit, and then in the long term it doesn't, and then we come to that place. Right? And maybe we come to it more than once. If we're fortunate, if we're privileged enough to get that choice, I can list names of friends of mine that never made it that far, and they're not on this side of the soil anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's tragic. How do we bring recovery, treatment work? How do we bring this support to everybody, not just those who can afford it or have the right fucking insurance?
Yeah, wow, I can feel the passion in your voice as you say that. It's for everybody. It should be for everybody.
It is. It's our birthright. Connection, mutual support, mutual aid. Yeah. Got a little intense there, didn't it, Nigel?
No, it's just the transmission, man. It's like
okay.
You came out with a tomahawk there.
Sorry.
No, I love it. That's passion, man. I'm the same. Like it's like when you tap into that energy of just something that feels so true to you, it's like it's like your whole body is infused by it, and it's a force, and a force of good, and that is powerful, and that is welcome. I think we need to have that passion. I think that's it's a super important quality to have, and especially if you have it in this work, it's like sometimes you can hold the passion or the possibility when the client can't just yet,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's lovely to feel that from you. So But wow, man. And so these are the things we need. So moving towards connection is, I suppose, a step in the right direction. If you're struggling with, whether it's sex addiction, alcoholism, drug addiction, any sort of compulsive sort of behavior, walk the clients or the viewers through, like some steps that you would recommend if they're struggling right now or have the wisdom. We maybe don't even need to have the wisdom yet, but they know something's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an important piece, isn't it? It's that. And I think most of us, when we're in active addiction, we're carrying that in a big way. We're burning so much energy struggling with that, right? With our sense of self-worth and our sense of being deceitful or just the pain of it, whatever. People have different experiences. I don't mean to talk as though I know what everybody's is. I'm speaking from my own experience, and from working with others. But yeah, it's not fun when you're in that place of active addiction where it's not fun. It's really not fun, So that piece you named about knowing something's wrong, that's a part of it, And also for people who are like in the loved ones of people in active addiction, right? That's super hard because it's so hard to see the person suffering. And it could even be further than that. They could be fucking you over, taking your money or whatever, making your life harder. So it's all bound up in there, the love that you have and the difficulty that it is, and that's why we need each other, right? That's a hard burden for a single family to bring. There's a tradition in my daughter's Jewish. She had a bat mitzvah back in the day. And I went to some programs that the rabbi did. She was the first female rabbi in Arizona, Rabbi Aaron here in Tucson. And she did some programs for folks not of the faith so we could learn about it and support our family and loved ones and participate in it and everything. It was terrific. Yeah. And one time she was talking about the minyan. And I'm sitting there in this class with other people. I'm like, yeah, I know the minyan. They're those little fuckers from that, what was it, Despicable? They're hilarious, the minyan, And she said the minyan in the Jewish tradition was like tribal elders. It was like 10 elder males of the tribe or whatever, right? And she went on to say, but the minyan, this framework, the minyan, how it's relevant to us. It's not about being old guys that are in charge of shit. It's the circle of 10. It's that in times that are hard, it's unfair and inadequate to turn just to our immediate family for support. We need more than that, right? And in times of happiness and joy, it's selfish to not share it further than our immediate family. Circle Beautiful. Of 10, isn't it, right? Wow. And I was sitting there that day and I was thinking, who's my minion? Who's my minion? Shit. Does my dog count? Because maybe for some of us, like, I just cis-het male-embodied American fuckers anyway, like me, we have buddies, when we're young, we have buddies, we have friends. We might not see them for 10 years and then they show back up and it's like, hey, right where we left off, like, yeah, let's go shoot baskets or whatever it is. But the depth of relationship, right, that's truly supportive, that's a two-way street, And so I realized on that day, I'm like, shit, one can actually make a conscious choice to cultivate their minion. It's actually a thing it kind of hadn't occurred to me in such stark terms before, right? I'd observed it in other people. I've had a couple partners who were like, they'd meet somebody at a party and they'd come home and be like, oh, did you meet, Julia? And I'm like, yeah, I want to be friends with her. And I think, well, that's not how that happens. People become friends, not because they're on a list of people to be friends with. It just happens or not, And I'm sitting there and listening to Rabbi Aaron. I'm like, oh yeah, no, it could work like that. Mm-hmm. We could meet people and we could consciously cultivate relationship that's a two-way street and form our minion. And our minion gets to change over time. That's okay too. People can come in and out. But it's the reciprocal duty, right? I call up somebody in my minion. I say, hey, I'm having a hard time. Can you go for a walk with me? And they say, yeah. And then they call me and say, hey, I'm moving next Saturday. Can you come help? And I'm like, no, no. I say, yeah, sure. I had other plans, but I'll be there. So yeah, cultivating the minion, that connection, right? And for most people in addiction, we're if we have a sort of minion, it's people we're using with and stuff, but like that healthy, wholesome, reciprocal relationship, right? Getting that back into our lives. It's just essential, and not just for addiction recovery, for just happy, healthy, fulfilling life,
Beautiful, man. I remember I was doing a training in Spain, and it was a psychotherapy training, and I remember it was like my first day there, and one of the teachers was saying, "Oh, you live in Indonesia? Wow, like it's so amazing." And I said, "Yeah, you should come on over." And this person was dealing with some health issues, and I was saying, "Well, we got this, we got the biggest functional wellness clinic around, and then we can do this, and we'll look after you." And he turned around and said to me, he said, "Yeah," he says, "very seductive." But he said, "But you know what I got? It's better than that. I got a team of friends that are just so essential. It doesn't matter. It's just another place.
Yeah.
What I have here has taken me quite some time to cultivate, and it's not a luxury, Nigel. It's a necessity.
It's essential."
Yeah, and I like, and at that time, I had Spartan minions. I had Spartan. Well, I had people, but the quality, the quality of the closeness, the quality of the vulnerability, the quality of the raw, real nakedness of my soul being showed to them was Spartan. So that started something in me that is cultivated in today, where I have a group of minions that are essential, as essential as my wife and my daughter. I need them so I can be a better husband, so I can be a better father, so I can remember little Nigel, who's not the therapist, and take that superhero robe off that I wear sometimes, and just to slow it down, so they can help me ground in and just come back to the soil again. And so anybody out there we can't do this thing called life by ourselves. We need people. We need people. That's how we find out who we are or who we're not.
Right. Little of both, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to use that, Kevin, in the future. I have to say, that's that old rabbi sort of philosophy. It's so apt for this day and age.
Isn't it? Yeah. Dr. Seymour always would say, all healing is relational. We can't do it alone. So that to the question of like, what does a person do if they're in active addiction now, number one, be safe, just be safe enough, number one. Number two, be gentle with yourself. It's okay. It's fucking okay, And then next is, it's just like one word. It's like help, right? Help, And if you're met in that, if it's call and response and you call out, help, and you're met by someone who says, okay, then we start walking together, right? Then we start walking down that road. All the details are, it gets to change what works for one person or the next in terms of specific modalities or whatever, it's like getting out of the substance is kind of a prerequisite before you can do much else. And then after that, staying in connection and trying things and finding what works and then doing more of those. And that gets to change over time too. Yeah.
Wow. I'm thinking about I love all those sort of steps or sort of realities that someone would have that they could possibly embody, like be safe, be kind, be kind. My God, the shame, that I have seen in my own self in my earlier life, So I was addicted to marijuana at one stage, and the shame of that, it had me hiding out from life for a long time. And
Yeah.
but I'm just trying to relay back to my own journey to kind of help the viewer here to think, what is that? What is that energy? What is that power or sort of voice inside that allows the self to move towards another being? Like, what is that? And for me, deep down for a long time, there was a sense of, I think, being starved.
Uh-huh.
And that starvation always was there. And I was starved enough that it kept me hungry, right? Hungry for something else. But it was in
Yeah.
the background. And what brought that to the foreground, where the hunger brought me towards someone else and I didn't know, into that unknown of being into a men's group,
Yeah.
which was kind of where it all started for me. A little
Yeah.
bit of a pass now at one stage, and I had some awakenings there, but it was really it was the being with other people. And I never forget it. It's like the voices in the head as you're walking towards that, gathering of other men
Yeah.
coming in to tell your story for the first time.
Yeah.
And there's just this sort of, for anybody watching, it's like, they it's just acknowledge they're there, those voices sometimes, and say, pull yourself back into the dull safety of the familiar, the addiction or the hiding or the isolation.
Yeah.
So I think it was just this hunger that pulled me forward, and then just not listening to those voices, and then having an experience that, of togetherness, that really
Yeah.
to not know sometimes and to move forward anyway. That's what I did.
Yeah. 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 Thanks for sharing that, Nigel. That's so true. Replacing whatever was kind of contributing to the chaos with some sense of connection, yeah, so important. And well, something you said there right at the end, but it's escaping me right now here. It'll come back around.
Was it the hunger? But I tell you one thing, as I'm sitting here, the thing that helped me, and the hunger, there was a distant, I was starved, but the starvation gave me this. Of course, I was so like a hungry, haunting ghost from the Buddhist tradition, kind of not fully in, that sort of frame of beingness. Was there, but there was also something else there that kept me hungry for something else. And we were potato farmers, man, and we used to love to have the harvest time where everyone would come together. Everyone would would tell stories, would laugh, would cry, would hurt our backs together in the fields, you know what I'm saying, and complain about it, picking stones, then picking potatoes. It was like torture at that young age, but it was so beautiful as well. It was just that hard work together. And there was something about that community and that connection that I had forgotten, but my body hadn't forgotten it.
Yeah.
It was there, and that was the hunger for something new. And I
Yeah.
think that's, when I look back, that was the organic intelligence that that was kind of in my being, that never disappeared. Was always there. I just didn't realize it.
Yeah, I dare say, Nigel, we're all born with it, right? It's innate to us. And so even if a person felt like they didn't have, as you did, that community from the past that had meaning to you, that you reacquainted yourself with, even if a person doesn't have that sense from their past, it's still in us. It's in our DNA. It's a quality of being human. And we can find it, it's surprising where we find it. Some of us might think we have to go to a place where everybody looks like us or talks like us or whatever it is. That ain't true.
Yeah.
That ain't true. you'd be surprised where that connection can be. I mean, you know, a lot of us know this from life period, but for a person in active addiction or early recovery looking for that connection, and it can be hard to find. It's not to say that it's like easy. You can do a little trial and error, you know, but we get to trust our gut. Our gut knows. We'll know. We'll know. And you'd be surprised what shape, size, color, tone of voice, whatever, you know, those connections emerge from, right? What a wonder that is, that human experience of just finding. I often think of it as like in a group context, when someone is speaking their truth, you know, it resonates, it rings like a bell. It's so clear to us. Somebody's speaking their truth and you can just feel it in your chest. You're like, that's right. That's their truth. And it feels good to me to hear someone expressing their truth, even if I don't fucking agree with the content of what they're saying. The authentic expression of one's truth buoys each other's spirit. Like we resonate then in that way. And that's a resource.
Wow. That's the very thing that, you know, that I experienced, and that's what I see in my group's experience. And it's really always lovely to see people entering a new group for the first time and feeling over time feeling safe. Say, I don't trust it, doesn't feel safe, you know. But I don't care how we can all be fossil sometimes, or contracted, or have like been so beaten up and traumatized that of course the world doesn't feel safe and people don't feel safe. But when people tell that story, and whenever someone can experience being bathed in a bath of truth again and again and again, of authenticity, of vulnerability, it's like, I love the word buoyed that you used there, Kevin, but the way in which it calls forth that forwards, that it gives you the courage to be able to do the same, where then trust becomes something that can become real for those individuals. And
that's right.
And then there's a bridge that wasn't there, and then there's a door that was never even in the vicinity. That's an invitation to open and partake in this thing called being open, you know. And to see that flowering, I call it like a flowering. My God, like it's like I'm like, if I breathe deep, I'd be crying right now because I feel it in my being. It's like such a beautiful thing. And what else is it to do in the world than see people flower and come back to that innate thing called connection? You know, I love it.
Yes. Yeah. It's one of the secret gifts of let's say, in this case, addiction. I don't want to presume for people, but you know, I might even say of trauma, etc. That there's like this opportunity to like reset, to reacquaint with the oneself, home in oneself, home in the world, home in relational fields. It's like what a cool secret little gift that is for some of us who like wind up going down a road that's pretty curvy and there's a bunch of fucking dead ends, and then we turn around, go the other way, and then we get a flat, and then, you know, holy shit. And then suddenly we're not really sure where we are, but where we are is the place where everything gets to change, or at least a lot of things do. What a
Love
gift.
that. Yeah, there's always, to be sure, there'll be a few potholes along the way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So connection, you know, getting resourced outside ourselves. If we're heavily self-resourced, then that's always problematic, right?
Yeah, right. The mythos is sort of like the American mythos of like the self-made man and the lone soldier and the lone cowboy. And all, you know, I mean, I also see the appeal of that, like monastic tendencies. And you're like, yeah, I do actually just want to go live in a cave for a year and like do, you know, okay, both. And we're born for connection. It is what supports and sustains us. It's how we grow. It's how we learn. It's how we love. It's how we become self-fulfilled. It's through connection, right? Mm-hmm. So this notion of doing it on your own, that's probably the most important message to a person in active addiction is you're not alone. You are not alone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a whole bunch of us out here. We see you. You are not alone. And whatever the hell's been going on or is going on, it's okay. Yeah, lots of us been there too. Some fucking version of it.
Lovely.
Yep.
Lovely. And for anybody out there who is struggling right now and would like some professional help, and if you're in the UK or for example, where you're dealing on an NHS waiting list where you've been told to wait for such a long time, and where there's a whole philosophy around just the government giving you sort of 1 or 2 sessions of seeing a counselor or a therapist. Sometimes, guys, you have to, it's okay to go private. It's okay to reach out to get help from a therapist and to invest that money in your own health and your own future self. And again, if anybody's resonating with what's going on, or even just to take a pause and to feel how your body's been impacted by the conversation we're having here today with me and Kevin, please feel into it. And if you're interested, please hit the link below for you can reach out to Kevin. Of course, you can reach out to us here at Wellbeings, but just really allowing yourself to know that help is here and you do not need to be alone. But something I want to come back to, Kevin, because I love poetry, and I remember it a long time ago. I get the poem or the myth sometimes before I get to understand the reality of a situation. Sometimes I can get that back door into my heart that sometimes is harder to reach, and I get it sometimes through poetry and sort of mythological work as well. So to really come back to your mentor that you were talking about, this poet guy he was a therapist. I forget his name. How did he impact you? How did he awaken something or shake something loose in you?
Yeah. His name was John Anderson, and he was a poet, and he taught at the University of Arizona here in Tucson. And I studied poetry there and was for a couple years in the MFA program in poetry there. And so John was first my teacher, and then we became friends after I was out of school, and we were big Arizona basketball fans, and so we'd always get together for all the games, and whoever the current grad students were would come over and watch, but there was a crew of us who kind of anchored watching those games for 20 years, every game. And John sadly later died of alcoholism. He didn't find sustainable sobriety. And he was a gem of a human. He was a beautiful soul and a gifted and amazing poet and great teacher. And the thing I wanted to remember, the gift he gave me, the gift of listening, right? The gift of people who can actually hold space for us and listen, attuned, self-possessed, generous, loving listening, right? Who don't jump in and tell us what to do or give us advice or tell us why we're thinking this fucked up or whatever, but who can listen, And I've been blessed to have a few friends in my lifetime who really, I just think I learned how to listen from them. Not that I'm doing a great example of it tonight. I'm doing a whole lot of talking, but there's the ability to listen, And I then, with John, I was liberated to be my authentic self. So he didn't fucking judge me, In fact, we had pretty twisted sense of humor, so he'd laugh a lot at stuff, and then that's the best medicine, obviously. You can laugh at yourself. And so he would hold space and listen. And I think of the conversation would go something with me like, I don't know if you can, doing a circle. So I walk in like, hey, John, so there's this fucked up thing and I don't know what I'm going to do. And holy shit, I'm in all kinds of messed up situation. I have no idea what I really ought to do. It's so messed up. And then, I don't know, I've been thinking about, I know what I ought to do. Oh shit. Yeah, I'll just do that. Right. And talking ourselves back into our own solution that emanates from ourselves. Well, that's the useful bit, right? Not what the therapist tells me or whatever, what anyone tells me to do, but the organic intelligence, the innate expression of oneself coming to one's own solution. And that's in a relational field with someone else. And it requires this, not that they have any answers, but that they have the capacity to hold space for us to see ourselves being reflected by them. Right?
Yeah. I remember one time that echoes this point, and it's quite different when that can happen in a therapy session where the client can get in touch with their own truth, and for it to be, for them to have a lived experience of it in their bodies, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the first time, or one of the first times I had that experience, and then I measured that against other experiences, whether it was with a counselor or whether it was with a friend, and there was that, you need to do this, and then and like this advice given, which bless them, but it didn't really. It's like two different things, So again, anybody listening out there, is like, it's kind of triggering sometimes to have somebody kind of saying like, you got to do this, which implies that you don't know what you're doing, or it's something that, and often it just is like, as my father used to say, it'd be like water off a duck's back. It would be, it wouldn't take hold. It wouldn't really take hold, and sometimes it's so for the viewer, like, what would happen if there was enough safety, enough interest, enough presence of another being, who maybe have their 2 feet well planted on the ground, and for that truth to emerge through you.
Yeah.
Because that's another type of therapy right there. I think that's what you mean, right, Kevin? Where you have that sort of connection happen, and it can allow that. It might take time to create that in a relationship, either therapeutically, platonically, but it's definitely. When you get it, you want to hold on to it for a while, because that's the good stuff right there. When someone can go that hard way with you, really listen, really be there, and help you come home.
Yeah. That's it. Well said, Nigel. That's it.
And you talked about another style of work you do, which is walking each other home. Want to tell people what that's all about?
Sure.
Or a philosophy of work. It's not. It's from what do you call the guy who the great spiritual teacher who's passed away now?
Ram Dass.
Ram Dass.
Yeah. That's a quote of his that I love. Right. We're all just walking each other home. Ain't that the truth? Right? I mean, I invite, if anyone listening to this, to reflect on how that might land, what it might mean. I can explicate a little bit from how it resonates for me, if you want to do that. Yeah. I mean, literally walking with people, literally, right? Side by side, walking together. I work with some clients here outdoors in a park. We do like a walk and talk format. So we walk under the trees and in the grass and do our session together, literally walking together, right? Also, just the metaphor, the imagery of it, even if we're sitting in chairs talking, we're on a journey together and we're walking together, and in metaphoric way anyway, and also I think of like what did it mean as a kid to walk somebody home? We literally did that. I mean, there was a time before cell phones and cars and Ubers where we rode around on bicycles and we walked each other home. It wasn't that long ago. Yeah, but you literally did. You say, oh, okay, Steve has to go home now. Okay, you walk him home, be back in 20 minutes. Okay, so we walk each other home. It's literally, right? And that's like it's a liminal space. It's a transition from what you were doing before to what's next. What's next is Steve goes home to his house and I go back home to my house. But in between, we're like recapping the day, or we're saying, oh, next time we'll do this or that, or are you hungry? What are you guys having for dinner? Blah, blah, blah. It's a transition zone, and it's a sweet thing, right? And then we get a little older and it's like there's that piece of, I don't know, was like a safety thing, if you like go on a date and you like you walk them to their car, you walk somebody home, because that's, you want to see them make it in and the door closed and know that they're safe, because we want that safe and social, right? It's like there's a piece of completion around that. This is, I know they made it home safely, etc. Walking each other home, right? And ultimately, of course, we're all going to the same home, wherever, whatever that is, you get existential about it. I mean, that's all we're all doing, really, is walking each other home.
Yeah, well, in a couple of weeks I have Stephen Jenkins, I think it's Stephen Jenkins, I think is his name. He's a death doula. He's all about to really die well or to die wise.
Yes.
You gotta die more every day. You gotta die, you gotta let go of those constructs. You gotta, there's a way in which to really want to live, you gotta learn to die. You gotta understand a little bit more about that. And that really helps the movement towards, that homecoming. And I suppose the dying in a way is like a deepening into connection with the self, the other, and nature and the world around that. And he goes into great detail. He sat with people dying. They all die with anxieties.
Yeah.
And because of this, and the more one can really move towards themselves and have a shedding process happening through their life, then when it comes to that when you ring that doorbell, when it comes to the end, it's a different deal. It's a different deal. And again,
I look forward to hearing that.
Yeah, it's he's a 78-year-old, 80-year-old man, beautiful, wisdom like yourself. Another one of these 10 people at the round table, as a little boy pulling the apron of one of these wisdom keepers, saying, I want to be your friend. That's what I'm feeling here at the moment as I'm sitting with you here, because of so guys, just so you know, like if you're watching, you might feel it, but as I'm sitting here with Kevin, I'm feeling a connection. I'm feeling his presence. I'm feeling his, even though he's talking to explain and to share, there's a silence that beckons. There's a space that has me very comfortable here talking with this guy. And definitely, we're coming to the end of the podcast here now, but it's given me an appetite. It's again, another thing for life is how to improve our appetite for connection, for the appetite to move towards life in new, meaningful, interesting, important, sacred ways. And in this moment, Kevin, I'm feeling in my body, I'm noticing I'm leaving with this appetite for more. I feel I'm this little boy saying, "Hey, you want to walk home together?"
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm feeling
That's
what
right.
we're talking about in my body right now, and it's playful, and and you use the word humor as well, Kevin. Maybe not in this conversation so much, but in an earlier conversation, how important the therapeutic process to have playfulness and humor as part of it, because so many of us think it's all dark and dreary all the time.
No, it better be fucking fun too, or we're not sticking around for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel that playfulness sitting here with you in presence. So thank you for that, Kevin.
Thank you, Nigel. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So wow, so you got this, what a shaping process through your life that has you doing what you do. And I suppose we're just going to end with we have said it already, but let's say it again just to distill it further. Someone's in active addiction, or somebody knows somebody who's in active addiction. What would be a few words they need to hear.
Yeah. I mean, we're just talking about humor, and so it seems an odd segue, but it seems absolutely necessary to say, you know, this is also like life or death shit. It's super real, you know? So the first thing I always think of is safety, right? Staying safe. Depending on what you're using, operating vehicles, if you're buying street drugs and there's fentanyl and everything, all the safety. Number one, stay alive. Stay alive, right? You know? And number two is a little bit of gentleness with oneself, right? That compulsivity and the negative reinforcement and that loop and then the shame and everything is just recognized too, you know, you're not alone. You're not alone. And there's help. There's help. Regardless of whether you have money or insurance or you even know where to turn, just it's there, you know? Ask for it. And if you're someone who loves somebody who's in addiction, you know, you too ask for help. You don't have to be the only one trying to do this. It can often be really helpful to have somebody from outside involved to sort of like, yeah, because kind of like you were saying earlier, you know, about that, the therapist who's telling you what to do, you know, and I don't know if you saw it, but I did this gesture when you were saying that, because that's kind of how, you know, being told what to do. And even it's true for addicts. We have sharp bullshit detectors, you know, and somebody fucking preaching to us, telling us what to do. It's like, kiss my ass is kind of the first line response, you know, leave me alone. And that's part of the problem, the leave me alone, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're family, you get some help and support too, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just an individual problem. It's often it's a family problem. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And we have bigger work to do, you know. We're focused here on like the individual's experience of addiction and recovery. And of course that's where it starts. But we have systemic work to do, right? We have systemic work to do around drug legalization, around incarceration, around meaningful work, meaningful values, access to healthcare. We have lots of systemic work to do. So come on, join the team. Let's get going on there.
Wow, man. Oh, you know, I'm your day's ending. I'm just stepping into the clinic time right now. So, Kevin, it's a real honor, and I'm really touched. And I learned some things today, you know, and I love this. This is where we're, you know, I think whether another, I think another thing for any therapist, other than being in therapy and supervision constantly throughout the journey of discovering what it means to be a therapist. I think the other thing is to be able to be open to learn from other people, to not have it all so clearly defined. And thank you for challenging some of my definitions today that are in a percolating process at the moment in my soul, in my heart, in my mind. And I love that. So thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your presence. And we will be talking soon. I guarantee it.
I look forward to it, Nigel. Thanks for having me. It was really a pleasure.
Thanks, Gav. And yeah, for the viewers out there, thank you. We'll be back. I'm going to be doing some movement in the next couple of weeks to going back to Ireland for a bit. And so we're going to have some podcasts, but we're going to record some of them so we can make sure we keep up with the weekly heap teaspoonfuls of support. So again, if anybody out there got any benefit from this or got moved in any way, please hit a like, a share, or make a comment. It really helps us reach more people. And again, if anybody got impacted by what we've shared today, please reach out to Kevin. His link's below in the feed, or reach out to us. So again, we're going to end with this sort of umbrella term of what it is that we talked about today. You can't do life by yourself, or at least not be able to do it well. So move towards somebody, so then you can move towards yourself. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody, for
Thanks,
tuning in.
Nigel.
See you soon.
Okay.
Be well.
You too.